Hello, my name is Brian Dickinson. I am a history teacher and sociology teacher down in West Sussex. This lesson is exam. This is looking at the paper 3, which is looking at interpretations of history and how you tackle interpretation questions, which is one of the most difficult ones to do. So I'm going to go through a PowerPoint with you and look at how you tackle interpretation questions. Oh, sorry, I've just got to share my screen. I've got to do that. It's that one. So hopefully. Okay. So I was going to go through what we're looking at here. If you want to email me or ask me any questions, my email address is on the bottom there. Just going to go back to that there. So I've been through all this before with people, one of my previous lessons, okay? So, interpretation, 1. The Nazis were completely embarrassed. Hitler's false sense of power led him to believe he was more powerful than he actually was. The crowd of 3,000 Nazis was overthrown by just 100 policemen, resulting in 16 Nazi deaths and 3 police deaths. The whole attempt was poorly organised and subsequently was a shambles. Hitler also overestimated the power of the Nazis and was quite shocked when they were defeated so easily. When the putsch was over, Hitler and some of his men were imprisoned, which led to the collapse of the party, who broke down and completely lost their direction without Hitler's strong leadership. So this is talking about the Munich putsch. This is, I think it's the difference between what you're used to reading in history books and in what interpretation. This is someone's take on what happened. This is not all fact, this is opinion as well. They back up their opinion with facts, historians, not just coming out of their head, but this is what one interpretation of the Munich putsch. So where you might have seen this in the film, The Rise of Evil, Robert Carlyle interpretation or dramatisation of Hitler in the Munich putsch when he was imprisoned. This was a failure, okay? Interpretation 2. Doesn't matter when it was only written 2 years later. When Hitler was put on trial, it gave him a platform to speak to the whole of Germany. He was, of course, amazed the judges and the rest of Germany with his passionate defence in which he criticised the Weimar government and argued he was trying to save Germany. Due to close media coverage, people got to hear the views and many supported and agreed with him. The trial turned into a publicity dream for the Nazi party. So one interpretation is saying it was a disaster and they were actually easily beaten. It was a shambles. The word shambles is written. Interpretation 2 said, okay, despite that, it failed. It was quite a success for Hitler and the Nazi party because he was put on trial and was given lots of publicity. Okay. So when it's saying, study interpretations 1 and 2, they give different views about the Munich putsch. What is the main difference between these views? Explain your answer using detail from both sources. And when it says using details, you quote from it. It's only 4 marks. You haven't got to say a lot. So the main difference between the interpretations is that interpretation 1 says this. I know this because and this is where you quote. However, interpretation 2 suggests this. I know this because it says, and this is where you quote. Okay, so for example, the main difference between the interpretations is that interpretation 1 suggests that the Munich putsch was a failure for the Nazis. I know this because the interpretation says the Munich putsch was poorly organised and was subsequently a shambles, inverted commas, which led to 16 deaths. So this is where you're quoting from him. Interpretation 2, the Munich putsch was a success for the Nazis. How do I know that? Hitler's trial. It says that Hitler's trial gave him a chance to share his views with the whole of Germany. As a result, the trial turned into a publicity dream for the Nazis and won them more support. So that's how you go about this particular 4 marker. You find out what does it say and where does it say it. Okay. Suggest one reason. Oops, sorry, hang on. Suggest one reason why they're different. One reason. I'll get rid of this. So just one reason why the interpretations one or two give different views of Munich Putsch. You may use the sources. So one reason that Munich Putsch is different is, and I know this because, so why are they different? What is it? Why is it one historian can look at this event and go, ah, it's a complete shambles, and another historian looks at it and goes, actually, it was all right. It wasn't that bad. Okay, Professor. So one of them is a Professor A, say like Smith. You don't know if it was these people or not. So he says, I like to investigate changes over a long period of time. Maybe, okay. My interest is to study an overview study. I mainly use evidence from law records, maybe. It's how they've come to that view. Are they looking at a small part of the history or the point you're looking at? Is it they're looking at political changes? Maybe one historian looks at political changes. They might be interested in the national aspect of things rather than just small parts of it. Okay, and some people might look at the leader, where other people look at wider aspects as well. So this other historian over here might say, I like to investigate changes over a shorter period of time. They're only looking at maybe a few years. Maybe someone else is interested in local history as opposed to national. They look at diary extracts and documentary extracts as opposed to newspapers, maybe. They're interested in social history, so that's more local and cultural things. Okay, some are interested in ordinary people as opposed to leaders. So it's what part of this topic are you looking at? Or is the historian, are you looking at slightly different aspects of it? Okay, so one reason that the interpretation is different is that the historians who have written them have given weight to different pieces of evidence. For example, source A supports the idea that Putsch was a failure because the Nazis were banned. Okay, he's more interested in the fact that this was an attempt to gain power, and it was just badly organised, and they got banned at the end of it. Source B supports the interpretation too, because it explains how Hitler and the Nazis used the failure of the Putsch to change tactics and ultimately gain power. So even though it was a failure in terms of what they intended to do, it was good because they actually learned from it. You only need to give one reason. You've got to go in loads of detail, just one reason. Okay. So now, how do you read an interpretation? What is it you've got to do as a history student to read an interpretation? Read the question, what is it asking you to do? Read the interpretation through once, write down what the opinion of the interpreter, what is it saying? What are they trying to tell you? Highlight words and phrases in the source that show that opinion. Read the second source and do the same as above. Okay, so question 3 is, move my thing out of the way, how far do you agree with interpretation 2? So now it's asking you for your opinion about one particular interpretation. Okay, that Nazis' rise to power was mainly due to the economic crisis caused by the Great Depression. Explain your answer using both interpretations. And this is a 16 marker, and you get 4 for SPAG, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Okay, so it's only on this part that you've got to make sure your spelling, punctuation, and grammar is good, and also use of keywords. Please use keywords as well. Okay. So you get 20 marks in total. So interpretation 1 is from Ian Kershaw. He says, without the changed conditions, the product of a lost war, a revolution, and a pervasive sense of national humiliation, Hitler would have remained a nobody. His main ability by far, as he came to realise, was that he could inspire an audience which shared his basic political feelings by the way he spoke, by the force of his rhetoric, that's what he's saying, and by the very power of his prejudice. By the conviction he conveyed that there was a way out of Germany's plight, and the only way he outlined, and that only the way he outlined was the road to national rebirth. Okay. Interpretation 2 is from Amelia Clark. By mid-1930, amid the economic pressures of the Great Depression, the German democratic government was beginning to unravel. In the good times before the Great Depression, the Nazi Party experienced slow growth, barely reaching 100,000 members in a country of over 6 million people. 60 million people, beg your pardon. The crisis of the Great Depression brought disunity to the political parties in the Reichstag. The German people were tired of the political haggling in Berlin. They were tired of misery, tired of suffering, tired of weakness. They were desperate times. These were desperate times, and they were willing to listen to anyone, even Adolf Hitler. So how much do you agree with that? And you can use interpretation one as well to back up whether you agree with it or not. So what is Emilia Clarke saying? Okay, interpretation one. So the bits that, what is he trying to say? Without the changed conditions, the product of lost war, revolution, and pervasive sense of humiliation, Hitler, this is all about him. Interpretation one is all about Hitler. Okay, it's all concentrating on just him. Ian Kershaw wrote a book called Hitler, and the whole book, it's quite a lengthy book, is all about him. And how do I know that? Look, he's talking about his, him, he, all the time. He's talking about Hitler in general. So he's concentrating on just the sort of person that Hitler was. Okay, Kershaw is clearly emphasising the importance of Hitler, and look at how many times he refers to him, okay, in the pronoun he or his. He also states that the conditions on which Germany was at the end of the war is significant, but his main emphasis is about the importance of Hitler. Okay, so Kershaw is really saying that the most important thing about Hitler coming to power was Hitler himself. Okay, and the way that he realised that he could speak really well. Kershaw actually, sorry, not Kershaw, Emilia Clarke, on the other hand, is looking at other things. Look at what she's looking at. She's looking at economic depressions, Great Depression, the Great Depression, the Great Depression, weakness, stuff. So she is looking at it in a different way. Clarke emphasises the impact of the Great Depression as the most important. Look at how many times she mentions it as an impact. In contrast to Ian Kershaw, she only mentions Hitler once. So Kershaw is saying that the most important reason for the Nazis' rise to power was Hitler. However, Emilia Clarke is saying that the most important reason why the Nazis came to power is because of the Great Depression. What one do you agree with? Do you think it's all to do with Hitler, or do you think it's mainly to do with the economic? And that's what this question is asking you to do. It's asking you to make a judgment of what you think is the most important. So interpretation 2 gives the view that, and then explain what the view is, the economic depression. I know this because it says this. I agree with this because I know from my own knowledge that there's plenty of evidence to support this view. And give some of your evidence, give what you've learned in your lessons. It is from this reason that I agree with interpretation 2. Another reason that why interpretation 2 is correct. Try and give another reason. However, it is possible to disagree, and it's good that you can say, look, however, some people do not always put them, and they mention the fact that Hitler was really important. And you can talk about then interpretation 1. What the examiners are looking for in this particular example, in this particular question, is do you know why people are different, have come to different views, okay? Do you understand? So interpretation 2 gives the view that Munich Peace was a success. This is because it says, and this is what, look, see, that Hitler was able to use his trial to spread Nazis' ideas. Newspaper reported on the trial. People got to hear his views, and many supported him. Okay, I agree with this because I know that my knowledge there's plenty of evidence to support this view. Well, this is beg your pardon, this is a different question about how far do you agree with interpretation about the outcomes of the Munich Putsch. So it's the same thing, asking you the same things. What is here? Is do you agree with interpretation 2? Okay, so this is looking at the Munich Putsch itself and how much you think that Munich Putsch was a success. Okay, about the outcomes. Do you agree with interpretation 2 that the outcomes were a success of it? And here, this is showing you an example. I agree with this because I know from my own knowledge there's plenty of evidence to support this view, because not only did the trial give the Nazis publicity, it also resulted in Hitler going to prison, and whilst he was in prison, he rethought his tactics, he wrote Mein Kampf, and he allowed his ideas to spread. Okay. But you could also say, however, some people thought the Munich Putsch was a failure because it was damaging. He left as a leader. He came back later on, obviously. The Nazis felt to seize power, were defeated easily, and he got into prison. I mean, even though at the time it was a failure, there was a lot of good things coming out of it. So that's how you tackle paper 3 and interpretations. There's an awful lot, if you're doing Nazi Germany, of information about, you know, the actual Germany, and you only get a few questions to do it on. But the 16 marker is quite important, because you do have to, and this is where some people, I'll go back to this, some people really do fall down, and it frustrates me as a teacher that when it says explain your answer using both interpretations and your own knowledge, when it says use your own interpretation, using both interpretations, please quote from the sources. A lot of people do not do that, and I don't know why that is. People just do not quote from sources. Quote from sources. Back up that fact that you've got to show the examiner you understand these sources, okay, that you get them. The way you do that is by saying, look, here is, I know it says this because this is what this bit is telling me this, and then you quote from it, okay, and try and do that with both of them. Your own knowledge is, you know, hopefully by now, by the end of this course, when you've done your getting near to your exams, that you've done the course, you've done all the reading, you've done the lessons, and you understand how important certain events were. And hopefully you've got a view of whether or not one particular view is better than another. Please don't get too hung up on the fact that, you know, well, Ian Kershaw is a professor of history. Surely he knows what he's talking about. Amelia Clark is a professor of history. Surely she knows what she's talking about. Historians disagree. There's nothing wrong with agreeing with one side more than the other. Okay, examiners aren't going to care which side you believe in. They really don't. They don't know. They haven't got no preconceived ideas that Ian Kershaw is a better historian than Amelia Clark, or Amelia Clark is better at writing than Ian Kershaw. Okay, as examiners, we don't care. So whatever side you come down on, please try to come, you know, agree or disagree with one side or another. Try not to sit on the fence too much. So yeah, I agree with interpretation 2. Or if you don't agree with it, you think interpretation 1's better, then say so. There's nothing wrong with doing that, okay? You can come down on one side or the other. It's perfectly acceptable to do that. Last point I'm going to make about SPAG. It's only 4 marks. It's not a given that you will definitely get 4. Okay, you can get 0. And to get 0, your spelling and punctuation, everything has got to be pretty poor. Most people get 1 or 2. Okay, mainly 2. One common mistake that I used to see sometimes, and this is in the pressure of exams, that certain words that are in the text or in the question, some people misspell them. There's nothing worse than what a teacher sees or an examiner is when you've got a word that's in the question, like the word interpretation, for example, you misspell that. You shouldn't really misspell words that are written down in front of you. So please make sure if you're going to use a word like interpretation or economic or pressures or humiliation, because it's written down there, pervasive even, you know, make sure that you've copied them down correctly. Don't copy a word down wrongly if you can help it. Also, keywords. It should really not just be about spelling, punctuation and grammar. Please make sure you do full stops and commas. Capital letters, big thing. You don't seem to think capital letters. A lot of people don't use capital letters. Please use capital letters. You are throwing away marks if you don't, you know, you all know the importance, or rather you all know how to use capital letters and full stops, then use them. because you're throwing away a mark that you know a 7-year-old can tell you how you use capital letters, and at 16 you're not using them. Use capital letters. So you can spell Adolf Hitler, capital A, capital H. Okay, Great Depression, it's a name of something. It's an event, capital letters. Okay. So please make sure that you're spelling punctuation. It's nothing worse, so frustrating for an examiner. So when you see a really well written, really argued well thing, and almost like maybe 15 points out of 16, and then they get 2 for spag because they haven't bothered about their spelling, punctuation, and grammar. They haven't really thought about it that much. So please don't throw away points. I hope you've enjoyed that one and got a lot something out of it. The next one I'm going to do in a few minutes is on crime and punishment thing, and how you answer questions on crime and punishment, which is a bit different than normal. Okay, speak to you again soon.